What's going on, everyone? Today we're looking at One Kit Wonder by GGD. This is a drum sample library designed to be mix ready for your demos. If you're like me, you're running on a little bit of an older computer, what you typically find is that when you're trying to track and program your drums and do everything internally, what happens is your CPU maxes out pretty quick, especially with more expansive libraries like Invasion. What this does is you don't have to do any mixing. You don't have to do any CPU managing within the plugin. It's just you load it up, program your drums, and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about the amount of drums that you're using, what CPU scale you're using. This is super low, so you pretty much don't even have to worry about it. So that keeps your CPU open for you to be able to do more processing on your guitars, get the tones that you actually want. And you don't have to compromise, and your drums are just sitting in the mix ready to go. So if we take a look at the UI here, this is exactly how it looks whenever you load it up. There's a couple things happening here. As is custom with GGD, you can click on the UI and hear the drum. So this is how they are at the default state. Right, and if you really wanted to hear it in context, this is what they sound like straight out of the box. So they're already pretty close. You don't have to do a whole lot to that, but we do have some options here. So we have two buttons, which is parallel and master EQ. What this parallel button does is, imagine if we printed this drum track, ran it through a compressor, and just slammed it to where we're compressing it pretty hard, and you're taking that signal and blending it in with the original signal. That's essentially what's happening here. So when I turn on the parallel button, here's before. And here's after. So it's really just making your drums sound way more explosive. You definitely want to engage this if you're working on something heavier, something more in the metal range. But if not, you're doing something a little bit more of the fusion, something a little bit lighter, then I wouldn't recommend engaging that unless it's a special circumstance. The next EQ we have is a master EQ. What this does is it essentially scoops out a lot of the mids that are just adding noise to your demo that you don't really need, and boosting the highs and the lows. So that's essentially like a default EQ for a master drum EQ. So here's before. And here's with the master EQ engaged. So you can hear it clearing up a lot more of that mid-range so that your guitars and the grittiness of your bass can fit into that part of your mix, and your drums aren't conflicting with the mid-range of your guitars or any of that. So if we activate both, here is the drum track without any processing. And here's with parallel and master EQ engaged. All right, drums sound really big, but they're also scooped so it's not getting in the way of my guitars. Here's how that sits in the full mix of what I have here. No mastering chain, so no funny business, just guitar tones, bass tones, and the One Kit Wonder, exactly how I just showed you. So as far as that's concerned, that is a really good sound for a demo. Like if you're sending something to your band, I'm running OBS. I'm at 256 samples, and I have all these plugins loaded up. My mastering chain just bypassed, so it's still running through my mastering chain technically, and no problems with my CPU whatsoever. And I have a 2011 Mac, 2012 Mac, I don't even remember at this point, and it's running just fine. So that's a bit of a testament to how well this thing runs. And if I activate my mastering chain, and I did some additional EQ to get rid of some of that super high end and that super low end, and just getting rid of some harsh frequencies in the 2K area. This is how it all sounds. Right? Or if you just want to put a limiter on the end of it and call it a day so that your bandmates can listen to it, this is what that would sound like. The last thing about this plugin is that it comes with a mixer. And so you can adjust your levels for each of your drums. So you can solo each instrument. You can mute each instrument. And then we have some balance options. What this does is you can actually adjust if you want a closer sound to get more low end, or overheads if you want a drier picture of the kit, and then room for way more ambience. So if you're looking for more low end and more punch, I generally adjust these close microphones. And if I want more explosiveness to interact with the parallel compression, I'm using this room. Then I'm blending in the overhead to taste with the close to get different tones that I like. So that's how I go about adjusting these. Then obviously we have this reverb fader, and that's really helpful because oftentimes we want more reverb on a snare than anything. Maybe on our toms, but not as much. And then kick, almost not at all, depending on the production. So that's really useful. You can adjust your reverb, and then you have a master reverb here if you want to turn all of your reverbs down or up. For our overheads and rooms, our balance buttons act a little bit differently. You actually adjust how each cymbal sits in the mix. So you have hi-hat and ride, which are usually always directly mic'd, and then these cymbals, like your crashes, splashes, and whatnot, are captured by the overheads. Those are all adjusted together, and then you can adjust your ride and hi-hat as needed. And finally, in your room, same idea. Then you can also adjust reverb for that as well. So I just loaded up my preset that I used for this track. I'm going to go ahead and engage my mastering chain, and this is how my track sounded soloed up with the drums and then with all the instruments together. And then in context. And that's all about the One Kit Wonder from GGD. So I'd highly recommend, if you have a older system, or if you just want mix ready tones right at the get-go whenever you're trying to write and get in your creative flow. You don't have to worry about what sounds you're using, or you don't have to worry about how your drums sound. These come totally prepared for you to just start laying down guitar tracks, which is super helpful whenever you get a spark of inspiration and you're just wanting to write. Thanks for checking it out. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you later.